Alrighty, one more take. What's going on, YouTube? What is going on? Bonjour, my smiling people. I hope you're smiling. I was recently hired as a colorist on a job with Denis
Chapo, and then the second part just Valov. So like
Denis Shapovalov. You have no idea how many takes it took me to get that name right. Denis Sharapova. Denis, please don't kill me. So yeah, the commercial was for Bruce Coffee Energy, and I thought it'd be a good idea to show you guys how I color graded that in Davinci. Davinci is an incredible color grading software, and I'm not getting sponsored to say that. I have like 81 subscribers, and it's free. I do have the paid version, and it has a few perks. However, in this tutorial, a majority of the resources we'll be using is available in the free version. So go ahead, grab yourself a cup of coffee. I have also provided some sample clips for you guys to practice with in the description. Please don't share it or use this in your portfolio. This is just for practice, and I don't want to get in trouble, so let's get into it. Alright, we're in Davinci. First step, color space transform. So let's label this CST for short. CST is one of my last nodes, but because Davinci is a node-based software, I like to do it first, so that as I adjust my saturation, my exposure, and other aspects of my look, I can see how my final grade is being adjusted. I shot this commercial with my friend Chris. We used a Canon R5 in C-Log. So with color space transform, I am telling Davinci the details of what the video was shot with. That way Davinci can translate it or transform it, filter it, I don't know the right word for it, but basically converts it into a film log. And what's really cool about this is that if there are multiple cameras on the set, say there was a Sony, a Red, maybe there's an RE, maybe there's a drone flying around, we could basically tell Davinci all the different cameras, all the different camera settings, and Davinci will transform it into a consistent film log, which will allow you to pretty much start from the same base. Alright, next step, right click and add serial. There's also a shortcut for this. For PC, it's Alt S. I'm not quite sure what it is on Mac, but it just adds a new node after the previous node. Go ahead and right click on your film look node, scroll down to LUT. Here in film looks, you see this Kodak 2383 D65. Looking pretty good already. Alright, as mentioned, CST and film look are actually some of my last nodes in most of my grades, but I like to do them first so that as I am adjusting the other aspects of the color grade, I can see how my final product is being adjusted. If you're on PC, press Shift S, that's going to add a node before. And we are going to get started in our primaries. So I'm going to label this primaries, or PRIM. In the primary node, you basically do your primary balance. So you make adjustments to your contrast, your saturation. Looking at this clip and looking at the waveform right now, it's looking pretty decent. I do want to take the highlights down a bit, so I'll go ahead and do that. Alright, we're going to get into a little bit more advanced color grading. We're going to do some color balancing. We do this by affecting the vector scope. What's really cool is Davinci has this tool called Printer Light Hotkeys, which allows you to make very slight color changes to your video. It's really awesome. It's easier for me to just show you, but right now I'm looking at this clip and I'm sure you guys would agree there is a little bit of a yellow tint or yellow cast that I want to remove to just get the colors to be balanced a bit more. So press Alt S to add a new node. We're going to name this Vect, V-E-C-T for short for vector. And then we're going to go to our color tab. So go ahead and go to the color tab, and you see here I already have Printer Light hotkeys enabled because I was dabbling in here before. So go ahead and make sure your Printer Light hotkeys are enabled, and what that's going to allow you to do is adjust your colors using your number pad. Here are some of the shortcuts to it. If you just look in this tab, you can see like what each one stands for. The Printer Light hotkey shortcut for yellow, 3 is to add yellow, period is to subtract yellow. So if I just press period a few times, you can see I'm starting to remove that yellow cast and I'm adding more red into my shot. So now I have to remove the red, and basically you just go around balancing out. If you have too much red, you remove it. If you have too much blue, you remove it. If you have too much green, you remove it. If you have more green than you want, you remove it. If you have not enough green, you add it. If you have not enough purple, you add it. And you basically just play around with your number pad using your shortcuts until you get a nice balance. Okay, go ahead and add a new node, and we are going to name this one HSL Adjust, which is short for Hue, Saturation, and Luminance. In this node, we're going to make minor adjustments to the color. Go to the second tab in the curves window, here in Hue versus Hue, and add a spline to each color. A fun fact, I want to make an adjustment to these trees right now, so I'm going to start in the yellows. And trees, I have found in my experience, are actually more in the yellow range than they are in the green range. So just make some small adjustments to the yellow, and as you can see, it's adjusting the trees a bit. In color grading, it's actually the very small adjustments that make the biggest changes, so I don't want to go too crazy with it. And if I do go too crazy, it could also break the image, so I just want to stay pretty moderate. Go ahead and move on to the greens, which is affecting the quartz. Yeah, that's looking pretty hot. In the cyans, I am noticing that the adjustments to the cyans are affecting a lot of the image. I can't really separate out like one item. So I'm gonna probably save that for another node. Adjustments to the blues now, which is primarily affecting the quartz. It's a very small change, but it looks pretty cool. There's not really much purple here. And now in the reds, I see that the reds are making a huge adjustment to Denis's skin. I don't want to make that much adjustment to Denis's skin in this node, so I'm going to take the spline and move it away. You can see in this hump that this is where Denis's skin is, so I'm just going to move my spline a little bit away from that and just make a small little change to like kind of set up a base that I'll adjust more in another node. Let's go into our next tab. The third tab is Hue versus Saturation, and in this node we're going to do the same thing and adjust the saturation in each color individually. Starting here with the skin tones, I'll be able to pull down a little bit of this the sting that's on Denis's skin right now. That's looking a lot better. Now let me go ahead and get to these yellows and adjust the trees a bit. I want to add a little bit more saturation in it. The only problem here is adding saturation to the trees is actually adding saturation back to Denis's skin. So a way around this is by like I call it a stopper node, which allows me to limit the adjustment of neighboring nodes. So by putting this node here in right next to Denis's skin tones, I'm actually able to limit how much that saturation adjustment in the trees is affecting the saturation in his skin. You want to be careful when you do this, because if you do too much of a sharp change, you will cause your image to break. I'm just going to mess around with the saturation of the trees until I get it right. The trees are pretty important in this composition. We don't want them to take away too much attention, but we do want them to look good. So I'm just going to mess around the nodes until I get them to blend well. Another way I can mess with how much focus it has is in the luminance. A lot of times the brightest item on the image will focus the eye. So if I just take some of the luminance out of the trees, I'll actually subconsciously force the viewer to look at Denis. So I'll just take some of the luminance out of the trees, and yeah, there we go. That's looking pretty good. Go ahead and add a new node. In this node, we're gonna make adjustments to the blues and the cyans, mainly adjusting the colors in the sky and colors on the court. So here in the cyans hue, I'm just gonna rotate until I find a hue that works. This is definitely subjective. That's the art in color grading. You kind of have to just do it how you feel looks good. I primarily like to focus on like 2 to 3 colors. So right now we have a nice blue, a nice green, and a nice orange, and I'm liking how this looks. So I'm gonna go ahead and lock that in. I'm gonna make some adjustments to the blues now, which is primarily affecting the court. As I do this hue rotate, I am noticing a little bit of a change being made in the sky, but it's not anything too crazy. And it's actually blending them a little bit better. And it looks pretty awesome to me. Next, we're gonna go to the hue versus saturation. I'm gonna mess around with the saturation of the cyan a bit, maybe pull a little bit out of the sky. And yeah, that's looking pretty fire. I mean, just look at the before and after. There was definitely a lot of green in the sky, or a little bit more cyan in the sky that we've removed. But I think that looks pretty cool. And I think we're ready to move on to skin tones. Go ahead and add a new node. We're going to name it skin. And here we're just going to go into the curves. Mess around with the hue versus hue of the reds and the yellows. Starting with the red. And similarly to the trees and to the other colors in the video, we're just going to make some small adjustments. I do feel that his skin at this moment has a little bit of a yellow to it, and I want to kind of convert that yellow into a red. Typically I like to add a little bit more red into skins because it's like representative of blood, so it makes the makes your character look alive, more 3D. So that's what I'm just going to go through. And now I'm just going to go to the yellows, do the same thing. Small adjustments. Right now I'm going to go back to the primaries node and make a small adjustment to the midtone detail. Skin tones lie in the midtones, so I'm just going to mess around with the midtone detail to blur out the skin tones a bit. You can use this for sharpening also, but for this video, I want it to look a little bit more dreamy. So just by pulling this down a bit, I've created this blur. And in my opinion, it looks pretty good. It's kind of my own personal choice, but I think it's a cool little bonus to skin tone. Okay, so the next step is to add a pop. And in the pop, what we are doing is separating Denis a bit more from the background. So to do this, I actually create a power window. It's almost like a mask in Davinci, and I just center it on Denis. So this is like a higher form vignette. So we're actually going to isolate Denis in here, and we are going to go into the curves and increase the light that Denis has. All right, looks cool. And now we're going to add an additional node. It's called Add Outside. And what this does is automatically selects all of the video or the image that's outside of the power window, and we're going to darken this, and we're not going to darken it too much. We want to make sure it's very subtle. Once again, subtle changes makes the most difference, so we just want to make a subtle change just to add more of a separation and focus the eye more on Denis. All right, and now I'm going to add a final pop, and this is going to be an adjustment to the light on the whole image, and it's just gonna give a little bit more light to like the mid-tone areas and to the skin. There it is, 3 nodes of pop to really separate Denis and create more focus on him. All right, so go ahead, add a new node. We're gonna start adjusting some of the sharpness of the image for the video. I've learned this step from Kazi, the color grading legend. So I'm just going to change this to 0.47, change this to 0.17, and yeah, that's pretty good. I've blurred it out so much in the midtone details that I'm going to want to bring some of the sharpness back. We'll call this one Sharp 1, we'll call this one Sharp 2. It's better to do things in layers rather than applying a huge amount of changes to one node. Just do it more gradually. I like this strategy. So yeah, we're going to bring the radius down to 0.49 and scaling down to 0.23. Once again, very small changes. So we're basically just bringing back some of the sharpness in the background, while also keeping the softness that we've added to Denis' skin. Okay, now we're going to add one of my favorite effects in Davinci. It's called a glow. Let's go ahead and add a new node. So this effect is actually added after the CST and after the film look, so we're almost finished here. Add the effect to the node. Go ahead and select soft light, and we're just going to mess around with the shine threshold until we get it to a place where we like. and mess around with the opacity. This is going to help you to blend the glow a bit. This is all down to preference until it feels right. All right, cool. That's looking good. All right, go ahead and Alt S or add a new node. We're going to add a vignette using a power window. I see the sunlight coming in from the left, so I'm going to add a vignette on the right. It's basically just darken it 1 or 2 in the lift. Yeah, you can see the difference right here. Let's go ahead and label this node. Can't spell vignette. Vig right. And then let's go ahead and add another node, a node parallel. This is how you do that. I think this is the first time I'm using a parallel node in this node tree. Yeah, so we're gonna call this sunlight left, and we're gonna just like bring the midtones and the gamma up a little bit to imitate sunlight coming in from the left of the shot. And as you can see, this is just adjusting how the lighting is being cast in the video. I think it looks pretty cool. All right, the final step, noise reduction. Unfortunately, noise reduction only comes with the paid version of Davinci, so we're gonna press Shift S to add a node before our primaries. I do add noise reduction to almost all of my client work. It just like helps to clean up the image and make sure that there's no noise floating around in the final deliverable. So we go ahead and we're gonna add this node before everything. And in here, we're just gonna mess around and add some very generic settings to the noise reducer. The problem with noise reduction is it does take a lot of processing, so I do it last because if you have it activated in the beginning, it's just going to make your playback harder. It's going to be harder to play back, harder to render, and it might crash Davinci, so I just like do it last. And let's take a final look at our grade.
It says 20 grams of protein. No way.
I hope you guys enjoyed that and learned something today. I really appreciate you guys coming in and checking me out. Definitely feel free to leave any questions in the comments or send me a personal DM. I'd love to help you guys if you're like, struggling with anything. But I'm gonna get going. I want you guys to keep creating, people. Until next time, peace.